In the quiet stillness of an era before glowing screens and ringing phones, there was a time when the entire world could be held in a series of taps, pauses, and faint electric clicks. Behind closed doors and dusty windows, in small, lamp-lit rooms scattered across cities and countryside alike, men and women sat before mysterious machines, listening, deciphering, sending words across oceans and mountains, all without ever leaving their chairs. This is the story of the telegraph office. You'll meet the clerks who woke before dawn to sort messages from the night, the quiet operator who spent her life transmitting other people's emotions, and the night shift worker who sometimes wondered if the signals he heard were coming from the living or not. Tonight, you'll drift through that world, a place of soft clatter and flickering oil lamps, of invisible voices traveling through copper wires stretched across the land. This journey explores not just technology, but humanity, isolation, and the strange power of a message sent too late. From wartime secrets to love letters gone astray, and from eerie signals with no known source to the women who defied expectations behind the keys. So take a deep breath. Let your eyes grow heavy. Set your thoughts aside. And before we begin, leave a comment below. Where in the world are you watching from? And what time is it there right now? Now settle in. Let's open the door to the telegraph office, dusty, quiet, still humming with forgotten voices, and listen to what was never meant to be heard. The door creaked open slowly, and a low murmur of metallic clicks, ticks, and clinks filled the air like a peculiar kind of music. This was not a factory or a workshop, nor was it a library or a courtroom. It was somewhere in between. A place where noise had rhythm, but also urgency. A place where silence was only broken by the tapping of brass keys, and the faint rustle of paper each sound, signaling the passage of a message from one corner of the world to another. Welcome to the telegraph office. The room was long, narrow, and dimly lit by oil lamps in the early years, later replaced by gaslight, and eventually electric bulbs that hummed faintly in the corners. Along the walls, rows of tall wooden desks stood like sentinels. It was here that stock market news arrived, that military orders were relayed, that birth announcements and death notices crossed oceans and borders. It was here that the first signals of disaster were tapped out, long before newspapers could catch up. Upon them were the mechanical hearts of this place, telegraph sounders, registers, and keys, all humming with life. The scent of wax, paper, and warm metal fills your nose. A faint ringing in your ears comes not from silence, but from prolonged exposure to the constant clicking of the telegraph sounders. You've been trained to recognize the rhythm of letters, numbers, even full words, by tone alone. A man in a stiff waistcoat sat at each station, sleeves rolled up, eyes sharp, fingers poised over the brass paddles. And even if you did, their expression would tell you little, just the blank mask of someone who's half here and half 1,000 miles away in code. The tempo of the room changed by the minute, sometimes a slow drip of messages, other times a storm of sound as news raced across the wires. Some said they could even hear the sender's emotion in the tone of their keying, the hurried stress of war dispatches, the crisp neutrality of corporate orders, or the slow, uncertain beat of a grieving family notifying a distant relative. To the average visitor, it might have seemed chaotic, but to the trained ear of the operator, it was language pure, precise, and pulsing with life. Only the unspoken code of honor among operators. Break that code, and you'd be dismissed. In small rural towns, the tapping room might be no more than a desk in the corner of a general store, or a shed next to the railway station. One person might serve as both operator and postmaster, tapping out telegrams between handing out letters and parcels. But keep it, and you became part of something deeper, an invisible web of trust that spanned the globe. This was the tapping room. For every stock quote or military order, there was also a personal letter, a desperate plea, or a secret affair passed quietly between lovers. Not just code, but voice. You could almost hear the person on the other end, though you'd never see their face or know their name. The idea that even in isolation, you were connected to something vast and pulsing with life. That every time you touched the key, you became part of a conversation stretching across continents. You could be a coal miner's wife, waiting for word from a son in Canada. You could be a telegraph boy, racing through the streets of Manchester with a message that would change someone's world. A man leans forward, adjusts his cuff, and begins again. In a way, it was strangely intimate. They drank coffee in the early hours of the morning, eyes bleary, and still they tapped. Some began to dream in Morse, hearing messages even as they slept. Each station was manned by an operator trained to read Morse code by sound alone. Every click, every pause, every tap carried meaning across impossible distances. In cities like London, Paris, and New York, telegraph operators became unsung heroes of industry. Railways depended on them. Banks built fortunes around their speed. Even governments issued commands through their steady hands. And like the heart, its work was hidden from view, but vital to life above. The telegraph key, shaped like a small metal paddle, was pressed down in short or long bursts, creating the famous dots and dashes of the code. Messages intercepted. Messages that never reached their destination. Stories of espionage. Codes within codes. And rumors of operators who went mad from the endless noise, convinced they were receiving messages not meant for them. These electrical impulses traveled down wires for hundreds, even thousands of miles, before arriving at another station where they would be received, written down, and passed along. And all of this happened in a rhythm that rarely stopped. The tapping room was the nerve center of 19th century communication, before telephones, before radio, before the world felt small. And it was here, too, where people sat sometimes for hours, sometimes for entire shifts transmitting secrets they would never be allowed to speak aloud. Let's pause for a moment and simply imagine what it felt like. The chair beneath you is hard, but familiar. The oil in the lamp burns low, casting shadows across the wooden paneling. You don't look at your neighbor. You're too focused. You press your finger to the key. Tap dash tap dash tap. Pause. Tap tap. Another message begins. Some operators could type up to 40 words per minute in Morse. And if you listened long enough, the tapping became something else. The work was repetitive, yes, but it was also profound. By the 1850s, offices like these dotted the landscapes of Europe and North America. But the tapping room wasn't just a hub of commerce. It was a living archive of human experience. Telegraph operators saw it all, though they were forbidden to speak of what they read. A message would arrive, be written down on thin yellow paper, and delivered by hand to its destination. No encryption, no password, no privacy. Of course, not every office was grand or glamorous, but even in those tiny outposts, the power of the telegraph transformed lives. You could be in a quiet village in Yorkshire and hear news of an earthquake in Italy. And it all began here, in the tapping room. There was something almost spiritual about it. The stillness, the sound. There were operators who stayed in this job for decades, their fingers becoming permanently calloused, their hearing tuned to a language the rest of the world couldn't understand. Many died without ever knowing who had received the words they sent. In some ways, the tapping room was like a heart-steady, rhythmic, and essential. But there were mysteries here, too. Messages that arrived with no sender. But that's for another time. For now, picture the room again. The soft light, the rows of desks, the quiet murmur of communication stretching out into the darkness. Tap, tap, the message is going out. And someone, somewhere, is waiting to hear it. The first pale fingers of dawn barely touched the city when the quiet streets began to stir. Outside the telegraph office, the world was still wrapped in a misty silence, the kind that seems to hold its breath before the bustle begins. Inside, the tapping room so alive the night before now seemed to rest beneath the heavy cloak of early morning calm. But that calm was about to change. From the dim corners of nearby boarding houses and cramped flats, clerks and operators rose to meet the day ahead. The heavy wooden door groaned on its hinges once more, familiar and welcoming to those who entered. The faint scent of fresh ink mixed with the lingering warmth of fading oil lamps. The office heartbeat still present in the early hours. Chairs scraped gently against the wooden floorboards as operators settled into their stations. They were men and women accustomed to long hours, their lives tied to the rhythm of the wires. The clerks worked with quiet concentration, aware that behind every piece of paper was someone waiting, hoping, or fearing the news contained within. Some wore woolen scarves to keep out the lingering chill. Others clutched tin cups of strong, dark coffee like a lifeline. Their fingers were stained and marked not with dirt, but with the signs of their work. Ink smudges from hurried notes, the faint scars from brass keys, and most tellingly, the coffee stains that seemed almost like badges of honor. For all the technology and machinery, it was the people who made it tick. Nearby, a small wooden shelf held chipped mugs and bottles of ink tools, as essential as the wires themselves. A young operator lifted a steaming cup, his fingers wrapped tightly around it, savoring the warmth before settling down to work. The faint whistle of a distant train hinted at the vast network the Telegraph connected to, spanning cities and countries alike. But inside the office, time seemed to slow, every sound and movement measured, deliberate. His eyes scanned the page swiftly, then he pressed a finger to his lips and reached for the key to send it onward. The sounder responded immediately, translating his finger's taps into a stream of electric pulses that would soon be heard thousands of miles away. They had learned to read the subtle changes in tone and pace, recognizing the difference between a frantic plea and a formal report. Experience shaped their understanding, years spent listening to the invisible conversations that shaped the world. Tap, tap, tap. The unmistakable rhythm of Morse code filled the room once again. Each operator's fingers danced across the brass paddles, sending signals that would travel invisible highways of copper wire. The clicks and dashes, familiar as a heartbeat, were the language of connection between merchants and bankers, soldiers and generals, lovers and families. Ink pots were topped up. Fingers never stopped moving. He imagined the faces behind the messages, the distant relatives, the traders watching markets fluctuate, the soldiers awaiting orders. It was easy to feel connected, even though the office walls seemed to close in around him. His eyes were sharp, trained to spot the slightest misstep that could delay a message or cause a mistake. The thin strip, marked with tiny perforations, was a physical record of the code, a relic of communication that was both fragile and enduring. It was a reminder that every message sent here was permanent in some way, a piece of history etched into the office's memory. Yet his voice was calm, steady, a quiet reassurance amid the constant noise. Others were more urgent warnings of delays, changes in orders, or requests for immediate action. The arrival of the morning shift was never silent. Operators shared glances, sometimes a brief smile, often a word of encouragement during the long stretches of work. They understood the weight of their responsibility to be the voices of those who could not speak directly, the hands that carried news over great distances. The initial quiet concentration gave way to a steady hum of activity. Chairs creaked as operators leaned forward, fingers flying over keys. Messages were sorted, dispatched, and recorded with practiced efficiency. Telegraph sounders hummed back to life, their delicate metal tongues vibrating softly with electricity. But it was also essential. The telegraph office was a lifeline, a place where information flowed faster than ever before in human history. The day was still young, but the pulse of the telegraph office was strong and sure. The day's light brightened, casting longer shadows across the desks. Outside, The noise of the city grew louder, the clatter of hooves, the calls of street vendors, the chatter of early commuters. The office was no longer a shadowed room of whispered clicks. It had become a buzzing center of connection, a gateway to the world beyond. But inside, the steady beat of telegraph code was constant, unchanging. Others pulled thick coats tighter, braced against the chill that lingered even inside the brick walls. The murmur of voices was low, respectful, a shared understanding that the day's work was just beginning, and focus was paramount. The hours ahead promised new challenges. Sudden influxes of messages, urgent orders, and the constant demand for precision. Keys, once cold and still, were pressed and tapped in simple tests, making sure each connection was clear, each wire intact. The faintest clicks and ticks began to fill the air, a subtle melody that would soon grow into the steady pulse of messages. Soft footsteps echoed through the hallways as these early workers shuffled into the office. These were the stories and secrets brought in from far-flung places while the city slept. Dispatches from the railways, urgent military orders, personal telegrams carrying news of births, deaths, and everything in between. It was a ritual as much as a duty. The men and women began the slow process of warming up the machines, those intricate mechanical marvels that had become the lifeblood of communication. Some clerks checked the overnight messages stacked on their desks, worn paper slips folded and unfolded under tired fingertips. Sorting these messages was an art in itself. Each slip was carefully examined, classified, and arranged to ensure swift delivery or further transmission. As the coffee brewed and the early light crept through the windows, the office slowly stirred awake. In the corner, a kettle hissed softly, releasing steam that mingled with the dusty air. It was in these small moments, the clink of a cup, the scratch of a pen, that the human side of the telegraph office came alive. Some operators exchanged quiet greetings, nodding to each other as they prepared for the long hours ahead. Outside, the city began to stir. Horse-drawn carts rattled by, their wheels splashing through muddy streets. Gradually, the volume of messages picked up. The telegraph keys began to clatter with increasing urgency. At the far end of the room, a clerk unfolded a fresh telegram marked urgent. And so the cycle continued, messages arriving, being decoded, and then passed on in turn. The office was alive once more. For those working the morning shift, these first hours were both routine and vital. Coffee cups were refilled. Yet, beyond the mechanical precision, there was a quiet camaraderie here. And it was in this shared purpose that they found meaning. One young clerk, barely out of his teens, looked up from his desk with a thoughtful expression. The steady tapping around him felt almost hypnotic. Time passed differently in the telegraph office. Minutes stretched and folded into one another. With each passing hour, the morning shift pressed on. A supervisor made his rounds, checking the machines and exchanging a few words with each operator. In one corner, a clerk carefully rewound a spool of paper tape, preparing it for the next message. As the morning wore on, new batches of messages arrived from distant stations. Some were routine reports, weather updates, shipment schedules, market prices. The clerks handled each with the same careful attention, aware that even the smallest detail mattered. Among the operators, there was a sense of pride in their work. It was demanding, often monotonous, and sometimes exhausting. And in the hands of these morning workers, the lifeline was kept alive. By mid-morning, the energy in the room had shifted. Outside, the sun climbed higher, casting warm light through the windows and illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air. And yet, the work was far from over. As the morning shift continued, they prepared for the inevitable handoff to the afternoon team. But for now, there was a quiet satisfaction in the steady rhythm of the room. The morning shift had arrived. The telegraph office was awake once more. And somewhere beyond these walls, the messages sent here would ripple out, changing lives and shaping stories far beyond the reach of any single operator. As the last coffee cup was emptied and the first deliveries made, a sense of anticipation filled the air. And just as the morning shift found its pace, the next part of our story awaits, the tapping room's unending dance where the day's most urgent messages take flight. As the morning shift settled into its steady rhythm, the tapping room transformed once again from a place of preparation into a theater of sound. Here, in this dimly lit space lined with wooden desks and buzzing machines, the real magic of telegraphy began. The language of Morse code, spoken not in words, but in clicks and pauses, dots and dashes. Imagine yourself standing in the middle of the room. Around you, the telegraph sounders begin their delicate symphony. The metal armatures move with a soft, almost hypnotic, clacking noise short, sharp taps followed by longer, resonant tones. It's a strange kind of music, unlike anything you've ever heard, and yet it fills the air completely. At first, to an untrained ear, it might sound like little more than random clicking. But to those who worked here day in, day out, it was a language as clear and expressive as any spoken word. This was the sound of the line. And translate these abstract sounds into words and meaning without ever looking at the paper? Every tap carried meaning. Every pause was deliberate. And every operator had learned to listen deeply, not just with their ears, but with their entire being. It was simple yet elegant, a code of dots and dashes that could be tapped out quickly or slowly, depending on the message and the urgency behind it. A hurried, clipped series of clicks might signal urgency or distress, while a slower, more measured rhythm could convey calm or routine business. The rhythm of Morse code was unlike any other communication method before it. The beauty of this system lay in its universality. Across continents and oceans, operators spoke the same tongue of sound, bridging languages, cultures, and distances. Hours spent listening to the steady pulse of taps could make the sound become a background hum in their minds. Some even said they began to dream in Morse code, the dots and dashes echoing behind closed eyelids. But how did they do it? How could someone sit for hours, eyes fixed on the clicking machine? Over time, the taps transformed from isolated signals into flowing sentences and stories. The line spoke not just facts, but emotions and urgency messages that could mean the difference between life and death. Fellow operators could often identify a sender simply by the sound of their taps. And tone corresponds to a letter, a number, or punctuation. Instead of waiting for a paper tape to be printed, read, and then typed out, operators could respond immediately, speeding up the flow of information through the network. It was a symbol of connection, a heartbeat that linked cities, countries, and continents. The slightest mistake could change a word's meaning entirely. With practiced fingers, they sent the reply, continuing the invisible conversation that stretched across wires and waves. Love letters, news from home, pleas for help, all carried through this steady pulse of sound. The voices they heard were ghosts on the wire, present only in sound. The answer lies in years of practice, sharp focus, and an almost musical intuition. Seasoned telegraph operators became masters of auditory decoding. Each tap was a thread in a vast web of communication that shaped the modern world. Acting on this, help was sent, saving countless lives. It was proof that the sound of the line could convey more than mere words. It could carry the weight of human feeling and intuition. Operators became silent witnesses to the stories of countless strangers, many of whom they would never meet. They could hear entire sentences in the tapping alone, often before a message was fully sent. Their fingers danced over the keys in perfect time, sending and receiving at speeds that seemed impossible. Some operators claimed they could tell a message as moved by the tone and speed of the taps. The sound of the line is more than noise. It is history speaking. Operators respected the silence that allowed the line's sound to carry clearly. It was as if each message carried an invisible voice, spoken softly through the wire. Many operators described the experience as deeply immersive, almost trance-like. For a beginner, the task might seem daunting. Imagine sitting alone in this quiet room, listening to a stream of clicks, knowing that each pause, but with patience and practice, the sound became clear. Operators learned to recognize common letter combinations and phrases instantly. The process of decoding by ear alone saved precious seconds. In fact, some of the fastest operators could send and receive more than 40 words per minute, a remarkable feat given the technology of the time. There was an artistry to it, too. Some operators developed unique styles of keen, subtle variations in rhythm and pressure that became their signature. But this skill required intense concentration. Even a brief distraction could lead to errors, misinterpretations, or missed messages. That's why the tapping room, despite its constant activity, was often described as a place of solemn focus. Conversations were rare, distractions unwelcome. Over time, the sound of the line became more than just a method of communication. When a message arrived from a distant station, the operator listened intently, translating the clicks into meaning. This connection was vital not only for commerce and government, but for the personal lives behind each message. One famous story tells of an operator during wartime who, through the rhythm of a tapped message, detected the subtle distress hidden within the code. Yet, despite the intimacy of the work, the operators rarely met the senders or recipients. This gave rise to a strange duality. The telegraph office was both intensely personal and deeply anonymous. Still, that didn't diminish their sense of purpose. And so, the sound of the line continued unceasing, precise, and hauntingly beautiful. As the morning shift moved deeper into its work, the tapping grew more urgent, messages more frequent. The room thrummed with life and purpose. And behind it all was the steady heartbeat of Morse code guiding the flow of information, bridging distances, and connecting people in ways never before imagined. The tapping room was alive once more, its sound the music of a new era. From this place of clicks and pauses, stories traveled far beyond the walls of the office carrying news, hope, and sometimes sorrow to destinations known and unknown. And as the day progressed, the operators prepared to pass the line along, knowing that the pulse of communication would never truly stop. The next chapter of our journey leads us deeper into the lives of these operators, the people behind the machines, their struggles, and their silent sacrifices. But for now, listen closely, hear the rhythm, feel the pulse. If the sound of the line was the heartbeat of the telegraph office, then the wire itself was its lifeline, an invisible thread stretching across oceans, continents, and countless borders. This single wire, carrying those clicks and taps, held the power to unite distant lands, transform commerce, and even change the course of history. Imagine for a moment the world before the telegraph. Messages traveled on horseback, by ship, or by train, sometimes taking weeks, even months to reach their destination. Suddenly, the world grew smaller. Time zones and vast distances mattered less. People could share information in minutes rather than months. It was a revolution of connection. News moved slowly, limited by the speed of physical travel. For the first time, a message could be sent from Europe to North America, almost instantly, a feat that seemed like magic to many. The flow of information was fragmented, often outdated by the time it arrived. Then came the telegraph wire. Birth announcements, marriage proposals, farewells, and condolences traveled through this wire, connecting lives separated by oceans and borders. It carried hope, power, and sometimes fear. A slender strand of copper, strung through poles and underseas, linking cities thousands of miles apart in a network no one had ever seen before. Military commands could be relayed faster than ever, altering the strategies of wars. Storms, accidents, and natural wear threatened to sever the connection at any moment. Maintenance crews worked tirelessly, often in dangerous conditions, to repair breaks and keep the network alive. Every repair was a race against time, a battle to maintain the flow of information. Messages intercepted or cut could mean disaster. Entire battles hinged on the reliability and secrecy of telegraph lines. Sabotage and espionage became everyday concerns, adding tension to an already high-stakes job for operators. It brought news of safety after disasters, coordinated relief efforts, and provided comfort to those far from home. Battles were fought with knowledge gleaned from distant fronts, communicated by the fragile copper line. Carrying the hopes, the operators remained vigilant. The afternoon shift would arrive to take over the endless flow of communication, but the wire itself would never rest. Power decisions and change lives one tap, one message, one connection at a time. The messages grew more urgent, the stakes higher, and the wire continued to hum with life, fears and stories of a rapidly changing world. Without it, the modern era of instant connection would have been unimaginable. We begin to see how a simple strand of copper became the thread that wove the world together. We'll explore the lives behind the wire, the operators who carried the burden and the stories they lived, often unseen and unheard. The telegraph became a tool of diplomacy, espionage, and strategy. Remember this, the telegraph wire was more than technology. It was the first real bridge across the vastness of the world, connecting hearts and minds in a way no one had dreamed possible. The first transatlantic telegraph cable, laid beneath the stormy depths of the Atlantic Ocean in the 1850s, was a marvel of engineering and ambition. This wire carried more than just words. Stock markets became linked, allowing traders in London, New York, and Paris to react in real time to market changes. Shipping companies coordinated routes with precision, reducing delays and losses. Or the first time a stock market crash was broadcast across the wire, sparking panic in cities worldwide. These moments were made possible by this single slender wire. News agencies transformed journalism by delivering breaking stories faster than any newspaper could print. Governments quickly realized its potential, but the impact was not limited to governments and armies. Businessmen across the globe saw new opportunities. And at the heart of it all were the personal telegrams, short, urgent, sometimes joyful, sometimes tragic messages sent between families and loved ones. This was communication on a scale never imagined before. The wire could build bridges, but it could also tear them down. In times of war, it became a weapon as much as a tool. Yet for all its power, the wire was delicate. This fragility made the wire all the more precious. In remote outposts, where the telegraph office might be the only link to the outside world, the wire was a lifeline in the truest sense. The global impact of the telegraph wire was profound and lasting. It reshaped politics, economics, and social life. It laid the groundwork for the communication systems we rely on today. Consider the moment when a telegram arrived announcing the end of a war, bringing relief to millions. And behind every message sent along, it were the operators and clerks, the people who gave voice to the wire, transforming its electrical pulses into meaning and action. The telegraph wire was a silent witness to history. As the day wore on in the telegraph office, soon it would continue to link people. And as we follow the pulse of this wire through history, next, for now, the telegraph office was more than just a hub of routine messages and business communications. Beneath the steady rhythm of taps and clicks, another, more secretive layer of communication wove its way through the wires, one filled with mystery, intrigue, and shadows. Certain messages seemed different, encrypted, coded, or scrambled in ways that didn't match the ordinary flow of Morse. These messages were the cryptic signals, the whispered secrets hidden beneath the surface of everyday communication. Some operators could tell immediately that this was no ordinary telegram. Yet they traveled over the same open lines as personal letters and business orders, vulnerable to interception. Among the clerks and operators who handled the endless stream of telegrams, a small number began to notice something unusual. Repeated sequences, unusual groupings of characters, or strange pauses in the rhythm that hinted at deliberate coding. These patterns were puzzles, invitations to unlock secrets. In an era before modern encryption machines and digital ciphers, secrecy relied on simpler but no less effective methods. By decoding these transmissions, intelligence officers gained crucial insights into enemy plans and strategies. These early breakthroughs laid the groundwork for the modern field of cryptography. Governments and military organizations used codes and ciphers to protect their most sensitive information. Discovering secret codes wasn't just a matter of intellectual challenge, it could be dangerous. Operators suspected of espionage or leaking information were closely watched. Spies used coded messages sent over telegraph lines to communicate with handlers abroad. Sometimes, operators found themselves unwittingly carrying messages that could change the course of diplomacy or war. Trust was paramount, and breaking it could mean dismissal, imprisonment, or worse. And it was up to the telegraph clerks, many of whom were just ordinary workers, to recognize and sometimes even decode these hidden messages. Sometimes, the smallest detail uncovered in a cryptic telegram could alter the course of history. They were guardians of secrets, silent watchers who protected their countries with nothing more than sharp ears and quick minds. Of messages that seemed meaningless until someone cracked the key. Of shadowy figures meeting in darkened rooms to exchange encoded telegrams. It was a puzzle that could take hours or days to solve. Imagine sitting at your station, fingers poised over the telegraph key, when a message arrives that looks like gibberish at first glance, random letters, numbers, or strange groupings that don't form any recognizable words. The endless stream of dots and dashes often masked hidden dangers, false leads, traps, or coded threats. These coded messages carried vital information plans, troop movements, diplomatic instructions that could shape the fate of nations. Others kept their silence, caught in webs of secrecy and fear. Using logic, intuition, and sometimes a bit of luck, they pieced together the meaning behind the cryptic sequences. And the unseen toll of those who kept the wires alive and the secrets safe. The tapping continued, carrying with it the pulse of a world where information was power, and the line between friend and foe was drawn in code. They worked separately, often behind closed doors, translating complex codes that changed regularly to maintain secrecy. Their work was delicate, requiring sharp minds and discretion. And interception did happen. Some clerks, curious and careful, began to notice patterns in the encrypted signals. The earliest telegraph codebreakers were often self-taught or learned on the job. One famous example comes from the days leading up to the First World War, when telegraph operators intercepted messages between foreign powers. But the stakes were high. Yet despite the risks, many clerks felt a quiet pride in their hidden role. Foreign espionage was another shadowy side of the telegraph world. There are stories of telegraph clerks who recognized suspicious codes and alerted authorities, helping to uncover spy rings. The telegraph wire, once seen as a simple tool, had become a battleground of information and deception. Even as operators tapped out the steady rhythms of ordinary communication, beneath it all flowed a secret current of coded signals, hidden messages that demanded careful listening and sharp wits. In some offices, specially trained cipher clerks were assigned to handle sensitive encrypted telegrams. The skill required was immense. Without modern computers, breaking a cipher was painstaking work matching patterns, testing hypotheses, and relying on knowledge of languages and codes. Despite the challenges, their work was crucial. Decoded messages informed military decisions, diplomatic negotiations, and intelligence reports. Outside the official offices, rumors and stories circulated among operators. Tales of secret codes hidden in innocuous phrases. The telegraph office was a stage where secrecy and revelation played out in silence. For the operators, the work could be exhausting and isolating, but the allure of the mystery was strong. To be able to hear what others could not, to unlock the unseen messages of power and politics, was a unique burden and privilege. And while many messages remained mysteries, some were unlocked, their secrets unveiled by the quiet minds in the tapping room. As the day faded into evening, the operators prepared for the next shift, passing on their work and their secrets. The next part of our story will take us deeper into those lives, into the quiet sacrifices, the long hours, but for now, let your mind linger on the sound, the coded rhythms that carried the weight of secrets, the silent voices speaking through the wire. As twilight faded into darkness, the telegraph office began its slow transformation. The hustle of the day gave way to a quieter, more shadowed world, a place where light flickered faintly, sounds softened, and time seemed to stretch and fold differently. The lamps, whether oil, gas, or early electric bulbs, cast a muted glow that barely pushed back the darkness. Shadows clung to the corners, and the faint creak of wood and the hum of distant wires were amplified in the stillness. This was the realm of the night operator. Rain might patter softly on the roof, or the chill wind whistle through cracks in the old building. Imagine stepping through the heavy door of the telegraph office after hours, when most of the city has gone to sleep. For the night shift operator, this was their domain, a world of solitude, vigilance, and quiet tension. The operator's senses sharpened, alert for the slightest change, the distant clatter of a key, the faint click of a signal, the sudden burst of urgent taps breaking the stillness. The chair was familiar, but warm. The desk cluttered with tools, scraps of paper, and a well-used key. The air smelled faintly of wax, ink, and cold metal. The isolation brought a strange kind of calm. The shift blurred the boundaries between wakefulness and sleep. The steady pulse of Morse code could lull them toward dreams, while the flickering lamp kept them tethered to the waking world. A meditative space where the rhythm of tapping keys became a steady heartbeat to focus on. At other times, communication never stopped. Across time zones, messages flowed in steady streams, urgent dispatches from military fronts, late-breaking news, or personal telegrams sent in desperate moments. It bred tension and nervous anticipation that the next message might carry news of disaster, war, or heartbreak. Still, conversation was minimal. The night demanded focus and respect for the silence. The mind might drift to home, to loved ones, or to the unknown sender on the other end of the line. These moments were precious, an opportunity to shake off the creeping fatigue and prepare for the next wave of messages. These anchors helped them hold on to the world outside the office walls. Every small sound, each tap of the key, the rustle of paper, the faint crackle of electricity felt sharper in the silence. The quiet hum of electricity, the steady rhythm of tapping keys, and the faint glow of lamps created an atmosphere unlike any other. The human need for connection sometimes clashed with the isolation of the night. Hearing phantom taps or imagining voices hidden in the code. The long hours, many operators described it as a lonely vigil, watching over the invisible threads that connected the world. Without them, the world's connections would falter when darkness fell. The dim light, as the morning light spilled into the office, the night operator stood and stretched. We will delve deeper into those lives, exploring the struggles, the camaraderie, and the sacrifices behind the tapping room's steady heartbeat, ready to rest for just a few hours before returning to the line, responsible for keeping the line open and the messages flowing, but of people often unseen, always essential. Imagine yourself in that quiet room, the soft glow of a flickering lamp, the distant rumble of thunder, and the steady, reassuring sound of the key tapping into the night. And the repetitive sound created a surreal environment where reality and imagination sometimes overlapped. Outside, the world was dark and often stormy. Sometimes distant thunder rolled across the sky, the occasional flash of lightning illuminating the window pane like a fleeting ghost. Despite the challenges, the night shift was crucial. Inside, The night operator was alone with the wires. Hours stretched endlessly. Long, slow minutes passed with little activity. The machine hummed quietly, waiting. The night was colder and darker than others. With its metallic clatter, the streets were silent. Occasionally, the distant sound of a lone horse-drawn carriage or a stray dog's bark punctuated the stillness. Inside, the tapping continued, a small but vital noise in the vast quiet. Was both companion and taskmaster, reminding the operator that the world was still turning, even in the depths of night. Windows might rattle with the wind, and the flickering gas lamps cast dancing shadows on the walls. The operator's breath sometimes formed faint clouds in the chilly air, fingers stiff from cold, but still ready at the key. Every message could be important, every silence heavy with expectation. A missed signal or a delayed response could have serious consequences. Fatigue was a constant enemy, but discipline and training kept the operators alert. This waiting was part of the job and the burden. The loneliness weighed on the mind. With no colleagues nearby for conversation, no bustling activity to distract, thoughts wandered in the quiet. Sometimes, for many night operators, some operators spoke of strange hallucinations. Yet, while the world slept, the night operator was the guardian of this lifeline. Their work demanded vigilance and precision. In some offices, the telegraph machine, outside, many night operators worked alone, but some shared the shift with a colleague in a nearby room. Their faint murmurs carried through the walls. There were moments of respite, brief breaks to stretch and sip cold coffee or tea. Yet the solitude could be a heavy weight. Some operators found comfort in small rituals. A favorite book kept close, a photograph on the desk, or the steady ticking of a pocket watch. The night shift was a test of endurance, both physical and mental. And yet, there was a strange beauty in this solitude. It was a place where time seemed to slow, where every sound was amplified, and where the line between the operator and the world beyond felt both intimate and vast. As dawn approached, the tension slowly eased. The first hints of light crept through the windows, casting long shadows and signaling the end of the night. The operator prepared to hand over the watch to the morning shift, passing on the stories, the messages, and the silent vigil of the night. And as the city awoke, the night's work became part of the day as continuing pulse, a seamless thread in the endless web of communication. The lonely work of the night operator was demanding and often overlooked, but it was vital. Their quiet dedication kept the wires alive, the messages flowing, and the world connected through the longest, darkest hours. And so, the story of the telegraph is not just one of machines and wires next, but for now. In the steady hum of the telegraph office, where every tap was meant to carry purpose and precision, there were moments when the wires carried something far more fragile, messages born of accident, emotion, or forgetfulness. Sometimes, a telegram contained words of heartbreak accidentally revealed to the wrong eyes, a warning sent in haste that caused confusion, or a farewell that arrived too late. These were the transmissions never meant to be sent, slips and errors that turned the invisible network of Morse code into a deeply human tapestry. The relentless pressure to send messages quickly, especially in times of crisis, meant errors could and did happen. Imagine a telegraph clerk, fingers poised over the brass key. When a message slips, a hurried tap, a misunderstood letter, or a message sent before the sender was ready. The words, usually formal and guarded, suddenly break into raw emotion, an accidental confession, a sudden plea, or a sorrowful goodbye. The message might be intended for one person, but it slipped through the wires to another. These moments reveal the fragile humanity behind the machine. The telegraph wire, though a marvel, was vulnerable to storms, interference, and human error. Sometimes a message was cut short by a snapped wire, or a crucial phrase misheard and misrecorded. Ships at sea, relying on the telegraph's early alerts, sailed blindly into danger. The tragedy that followed led to new efforts to improve the network's reliability. but it underscored how fragile the flow of information could be. In some cases, senders tapped out telegrams in haste, pouring out their hearts in words that crackled with urgency and emotion. The telegram, meant to be private, was delayed and eventually delivered after the war had ended. The stakes were often high, whether in business, war, or personal affairs. The family's sorrow was mingled with the cruel knowledge that the message arrived too late, carried across the wires by a system that was unfeeling yet vital. The telegraph was designed for efficiency, yet it was operated by humans, subject to nerves, mistakes, and sometimes sheer desperation. Picture an operator receiving a telegram from a distant loved one. Many carried the burden of knowing the stories behind the messages, the tragedies, the triumphs, the private lives they glimpsed but could never share. The weight of such knowledge added a silent layer to their work. The tapping room, normally a place of stoic calm, could suddenly be filled with the echoes of those emotions, carried invisibly on the wires. Such errors could shatter lives. There are recorded instances of telegrams that revealed secrets never meant to be spoken aloud. Lovers' quarrels exposed, hidden illnesses confessed, warnings of betrayal sent too late. Messages that sat too long in the office, overlooked or misplaced, only to be discovered days or weeks later. The consequences of such delays could be devastating missed opportunities, lost loved ones, or unheeded warnings. Each accidental transmission was a reminder that even in the age of technology, human vulnerability seeped through. One particularly poignant story tells of a soldier's final message to his family, a last goodbye typed hastily, his fingers trembling with grief and fatigue. Then there were moments of technical failure, messages garbled, incomplete, or lost altogether. Operators worked under immense pressure to correct mistakes and clarify unclear transmissions. In one tale from the 19th century, a warning about an impending storm was delayed by a line fault. Emotional outbursts were another unexpected feature of the telegraph. Though operators were trained to be professional and detached, the messages they carried often contained raw human feelings, joy, anger, desperation. Imagine a wife sending a frantic plea to a distant husband, a mother demanding news of a missing child, or a businessman furious at a lost deal. And sometimes those messages were misunderstood or mistranslated, adding to the confusion and heartbreak. The operators themselves were not immune to emotion. Occasionally, forgotten transmissions added another layer to the telegraph's human story. These lost messages were ghosts in the machine, reminders that even the most advanced communication systems are only as strong as the people who run them. But despite these imperfections, the telegraph remained a lifeline, one that carried not just facts and figures, but the full spectrum of human experience. It connected hearts and minds across vast distances, in moments both mundane and extraordinary. And sometimes it revealed the raw, unfiltered side of that connection messages never meant to be sent, yet sent nonetheless. As the telegraph office continued its ceaseless work, these accidental transmissions served as a quiet testament to the vulnerability and complexity of human communication. They reminded operators and recipients alike that behind every tap and dash lay real lives, hopes, and fears. And so, as the day faded toward evening and the office prepared to welcome the next shift, the wires continued to carry their stories, sometimes perfect, sometimes flawed, but always deeply human. Next, we will explore the lives of those who worked behind the scenes, the clerks, the messengers, and the quiet heroes who kept the telegraph's heart beating. But for now, let your mind wander to those unintended messages, the whispered secrets, the late goodbyes, the emotional bursts that made the telegraph more than just a machine. In the quiet world of the telegraph office, where machines hummed and fingers tapped ceaselessly, there was another presence, one unseen, yet often felt. Whispered in hushed tones by operators after long shifts, these were the ghosts on the line. Some reported hearing the eerie rhythm of a message repeating endlessly, a looping signal from nowhere, carrying no clear meaning, but a haunting persistence that chilled even the most seasoned listener. Stories passed between clerks and operators spoke of phantom taps, mysterious clicks heard when no one was at the key. In a world ruled by precision and logic, such tales might seem out of place. Was it a technical fault, a prank, or something else entirely? Suddenly, from the telegraph sounder, comes a series of taps, steady, deliberate, but the desk is empty. No operator is sending, no message awaiting. The clicks continue, a ghostly Morse code without source. The office became a place of mystery, with newer operators hesitant to take over his station. Yet these stories were as real to those who worked the lines as the machines themselves. Imagine sitting alone in the darkened office during a quiet night shift, the soft glow of a lamp your only company. These unexplained signals often stirred unease, but sometimes curiosity. One popular legend spoke of an operator who continued to send messages after his death. According to the tale, this man had dedicated decades to his work, his fingers so attuned to the rhythm of the key that even after passing away, the tapping continued soft, relentless, a voice from beyond the grave. Some said the messages contained warnings, others believed they were pleas for help. Such stories gave the telegraph office an eerie character, blending the mechanical and the supernatural in a space where time seemed to blur. Operators recounted other strange phenomena, messages arriving with no sender, strange patterns that defied decoding, and sudden bursts of tapping when no one was at the keys. In one tale from a rural telegraph office, the line reportedly carried the sound of a long-lost operator's tapping every midnight, a reminder of a life devoted to the wire. While some dismissed these accounts as tired imaginations or misheard signals, others believed the telegraph lines themselves had absorbed the echoes of every message sent, the hopes, fears, and farewells of countless souls. The wires were more than metal. They were vessels of memory and connection, where the past lingered. If you hear a distant tapping when no one is near, perhaps it is one of the ghosts on the line, reminding us that every message carries more than words. In this way, the telegraph office became a place of stories, secrets, and spirits where the living and the departed shared the same space through the pulse of Morse code. These ghosts on the line were a testament to the human element woven into the machine, a reminder that behind every message was a life, a story, and sometimes a mystery. As night gave way to dawn, the tapping room settled back into its rhythm, the phantom signals fading with the light. But those who had heard the ghostly taps knew the stories would live on, whispered in the quiet corners of telegraph offices for generations. And as the world moved forward, embracing new technologies, the ghosts on the line remained a spectral link to an era when communication was both science and something more mysterious. Our next chapter will explore the human stories behind the machines, the lives shaped by the telegraph's reach, its demands, and its silent sacrifices. But for now, listen closely. In the world of telegraph offices, the tapping rooms filled with the rhythmic clatter of keys and the faint hum of electric current, there was a quiet revolution taking place. Hidden behind the walls of these communication hubs were women, whose fingers moved swiftly and accurately over the telegraph keys, who mastered the language of dots and dashes with remarkable skill, and who often went unrecognized in the histories written about this era. These were the female telegraphists. Though the earliest days of telegraphy were dominated by men, it wasn't long before women began to enter the profession in increasing numbers. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, female operators formed a significant portion of the telegraph workforce, especially in urban centers and large communication hubs. What made these women stand out was not just their presence, but their remarkable speed and precision. In a field where every second counted in accuracy could mean the difference between clarity and confusion, many female telegraphists excelled beyond their male counterparts. Whatever the cause, their reputation for reliability and skill spread quickly. Their nimble fingers danced across the keys with exceptional agility, sending and receiving messages at speeds that amazed supervisors and colleagues alike. These women persevered, known for their professionalism. Many female telegraphists formed close-knit communities, supporting one another through the long hours and the mental strain of their jobs, carving out a vital role in the telegraph world. The reasons for this proficiency were many. Some credited natural dexterity. Others pointed to the meticulous training and discipline women brought to their work. Female telegraphists often handled the busiest and most sensitive lines of corporate communications, government dispatches, and critical news wires, learning the code and gaining experience, only to rise quickly through the ranks to become lead operators or supervisors. Some became renowned trainers, passing their skills to the next generation. The job offered women an unprecedented level of independence and respect for the time, and contribute meaningfully to the expanding networks of communication that shaped modern society. Their steady hands and sharp ears became trusted assets in an industry that demanded perfection. Women played critical roles during times of crisis. They were pioneers in the countless messages sent across wires, connecting people and places, breaking barriers with every tap of the key. During wars, imagine the room alive with the quiet confidence of female telegraphists' fingers flying, ears attuned, minds focused, and know that their story is an essential part of the telegraph's history. Their dedication challenged gender norms and expanded the possibilities for women's roles in the workforce. The influence of these women continued, echoing in the history of communication. They operated the lines that carried urgent military orders and vital news, sometimes under great stress and threat. Competitions were held to see who could send the fastest message, and women often topped the charts. Balancing the pressures of a fast pace, coupled with their skill, saved lives and ensured the smooth flow of information when it mattered most. High-stakes job with personal responsibilities. For all their achievements, many female telegraphists remained invisible in the broader historical narrative. Many telegraphists were young women who worked long shifts, sometimes through the night, passing references in letters or brief newspaper articles. But their impact was undeniable, in a profession that required intense concentration and precision. In some offices, female operators were paid less than men for the same work, and their contributions were frequently overlooked in official records. But the work was not easy. Despite their expertise, women faced significant challenges. Social attitudes of the time often underestimated their capabilities or relegated them to lower paying, less prestigious positions. Yet, their presence also changed the culture of the tapping room. There are stories of women who started as apprentices. Their lives were often demanding. Despite these challenges, the telegraph office became one of the few workplaces where women could earn a steady income, develop valuable skills. Some female operators became local celebrities known for their speed and accuracy. In certain countries, they're calm under pressure, yet their stories are often told in fragments mentioned in company records. They helped lay the groundwork for future generations of women in telecommunications and other technical fields. As we consider the tapping rooms and telegraph offices of the past, it's important to recognize the women who shaped them. They were not merely operators of machines. Their legacy is heard in the steady rhythm of Morse code, and as the telegraph evolved into new technologies. Next, we will explore the messengers and couriers, the people who carried these vital telegrams into the world, bridging the gap between wire and reality. But for now, in the vast web of telegraph wires spanning continents and oceans, countless messages traveled every day. Most were routine business updates, personal greetings, or official notices. Yet, among them were a rare few telegrams whose words carried extraordinary weight. These were the messages that changed history, shifted the course of wars, sealed fates, or altered lives forever. Today, we will focus on those pivotal telegrams, the ones that remind us how a few carefully tapped words could ripple across the world. One such message emerged during the tense days leading up to the outbreak of World War. A telegram known as the Zimmermann Note, sent in January 1917. It was a secret diplomatic communication from Germany to Mexico, proposing an alliance against the United States. The revelation shocked the American public and played a significant role in the United States entering the war. The note promised Mexico the return of lost territories Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona if they joined the war on Germany's side. The urgency in the tapping was palpable, the weight of the secret message heavy in the room. The decision to reveal this telegram's contents was not taken lightly, but its impact was undeniable. The soldier, receiving this message in the midst of battle, found strength and solace in those few words. Each telegram was a fragile thread connecting distant lives in moments of joy or sorrow. It was a lifeline, a reminder of home amid the chaos. The message was brief and formal, but for the family and community, it was devastating. The telegram was intercepted and decoded by British intelligence, and its contents were leaked to the press. A few lines of Morse code, carried invisibly across the Atlantic, ignited a chain of events that reshaped global history. Imagine the moment in a telegraph office somewhere in Britain, where an operator relayed the intercepted message to officials. This telegram serves as a vivid example of the power contained in those brief bursts of code, the difference between peace and conflict, between nations at war and the hope for diplomacy. Closer to home, and more personal, but no less profound, is the story of a telegram sent by a mother to her son fighting in World War II. It was a simple message, just a handful of words, but it carried the weight of love, hope, and fear. Come home safe. We pray for you every day. This telegram was sent across thousands of miles, passing through countless hands, its urgency palpable with each tap. And couriers who took these vital telegrams from the office to the world beyond. In contrast, there are telegrams that carried heartbreaking news messages that informed families of lost loved ones, sudden deaths, or the end of hope. One such telegram arrived in a small town, announcing the passing of a beloved local teacher. The telegraph system, often seen as cold and mechanical, was also a conduit for raw human emotion, hope, grief, love, and loss. Another historical telegram that shaped the world was the one sent by the British government in 1917, announcing the Balfour Declaration, statement supporting the establishment of a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine. This message, though diplomatic and carefully worded, had far-reaching consequences, influencing geopolitical landscapes and conflicts that continue to this day. Behind each telegram like this was a story. The sender's intent, the operator who tapped the message, the recipient who received it, and the wider ripple effect on history. The telegraph allowed these moments to travel faster than ever before, sometimes shaping events in real time. It is humbling to think that such immense power rested in the hands of telegraph operators, whose fingers translated the world's most critical decisions into dots and dashes. Their steady work ensured that history's turning points were not lost to delay or error. In reflecting on these telegrams, we see not just technology, but the profound human stories intertwined with the wires. Messages that carried hope, desperation, strategy, and change. As we move forward in our journey through the telegraph's history, we will next explore the messengers. But for now, consider the power of a single telegram, how a few words, sent across vast distances, could alter the fate of nations and lives. In the intricate web of telegraph wires that spanned continents, cities, and countryside, the smooth flow of communication was never guaranteed. Unlike today's resilient digital networks, the telegraph system depended on fragile physical infrastructure wires, strung between poles, delicate batteries powering circuits, and machinery vulnerable to the forces of nature. And when those forces struck storms, accidents, or sabotage, the line went dead. Dark clouds gather rapidly, and the wind begins to howl, rattling the windows of the telegraph office. Rain pounds down in sheets. Lightning flashes split the sky, and somewhere along the line, a crucial wire snaps, severed by a falling branch or a gust of wind. Silence replaced the steady tapping, and urgency took hold. Imagine a sudden, fierce thunderstorm rolling in across the landscape. In that instant, the vital connection between 2 points is lost. The telegraph sounder falls silent. The familiar rhythm of Morse code vanishes. By following electrical tests or watching for breaks in the wire, they identified the damaged section. Then came the dangerous work of climbing poles or trees, handling heavy wires, and restoring the circuit often amid storms or near live currents. It was a race against time. Lives, businesses, governments depended on these lines. The telegraph network was complex, with many interconnected wires, but not every path was available or fast enough. Messages in transit hang suspended, unable to reach their destinations. Inside the office, the operators and clerks feel the change immediately. The outage lasted hours, delaying urgent messages about flood warnings and relief efforts. Panic is avoided by experience, but tension fills the room. The telegraph office becomes a hive of activity. Technicians and linemen, often brave men who worked outdoors in all weather, are summoned to find and repair the break. During wartime, telegraph lines were prime targets for enemy agents seeking to disrupt communication. Cutting or tapping wires could confuse military commands or intercept secrets. In the event of a power loss, the entire office would be plunged into darkness and silence. Lightning could strike, ropes could snap, and exhaustion was common. Yet these workers were essential lifelines, keeping the telegraph network alive through the worst conditions. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, line repair was no easy task. Linemen had to locate the fault, sometimes miles away, often in difficult terrain fields, forests, or mountain passes. The work was physically demanding and fraught with hazards. Inside the office, operators coordinated with repair crews, rerouted messages where possible, and managed the backlog that inevitably formed. When one line was down, alternative routes might be used. In moments of emergency wars, natural disasters, or political crisis, the pressure to maintain communication grew immense. One well-known incident occurred during a severe storm in the early 1900s, when the telegraph lines connecting a major city to the rest of the country were cut. Officials scrambled to use messengers and alternate routes, but the delay underscored the vulnerability of the system. Sometimes, failures were caused not by nature, but by human hands. Sabotage and espionage were real threats. Operators had to be vigilant, and repair crews worked tirelessly to counter these threats. Power outages added another layer of challenge. Early telegraph offices relied on batteries and generators that could fail. Backup systems were limited, and the pressure to restore power quickly was intense. The flickering of lamps or the glow of a generator returning to life was a sign of hope and relief. Despite these obstacles, the telegraph system proved remarkably resilient. Through the dedication of operators, repair crews, and technicians, communication was restored sometimes in record time. Their efforts ensured that the pulse of Morse code continued to flow, even when nature and circumstance conspired against it. The stories of line failures and repairs reveal a world where technology and human endurance met, where the quiet tapping of keys was backed by brave hands working in storms, darkness, and danger, and where the failure of a single wire could momentarily silence the voices of an entire city or change the course of events. As we continue our journey, we will soon explore the advent of new technologies that began to transform communication telephones, radio, and beyond. But for now, picture the frantic scramble after a storm lineman climbing poles in the rain, operators rerouting messages, and the steady hope that the line will come alive again. Behind the orderly rows of desks, the steady tapping of telegraph keys, and the rhythmic hum of the telegraph office, there often existed a space few outsiders ever saw, a locked, windowless room hidden at the back of the building. This was the secret room, a place shrouded in silence and mystery, reserved for messages that demanded the utmost secrecy. The secret room was where the most sensitive telegrams, military dispatches, government orders, and confidential communications were sent and received. Its very existence was often unspoken, a whispered truth known only to select operators and officials. Imagine stepping past the bustling tapping room into a narrow corridor, and then through a heavy, reinforced door locked tight against prying eyes. Inside, the air was cooler, the light dimmer. Its walls might be lined with filing cabinets holding cryptic codes and ciphers, steel boxes containing encrypted documents, and shelves stacked with logs detailing every message sent or received. The operators themselves lived under a veil of secrecy, never revealing what passed through their hands, even to close colleagues. The hum of machines was subdued, replaced by a tense stillness. Their training went beyond Morse code proficiency. They were versed in protocols for handling classified material, in recognizing coded language, and in maintaining absolute silence. Decoding and encoding these messages required additional expertise, and often involved collaboration with government cryptographers. From battlefield orders during major wars to secret diplomatic negotiations, the secret room was a hub of intrigue and power. Here, the stakes were higher. Every message carried the weight of national security. The secret room was more than a workspace. It was a fortress of information. One mistake, a misheard letter, a misplaced message, or a breach of protocol could have dire consequences. It might mean the failure of a military operation, the exposure of a covert agent, or a diplomatic crisis. There were tailies of messages destroyed before delivery, and instructions to forget what had been seen or heard. They became silent witnesses to the unfolding of events that shaped nations and lives. Operators working in this room were handpicked for their trustworthiness and discretion. Surveillance was constant, but subtle. Cameras or guards might monitor the room, while supervisors conducted random checks. Unauthorized access was unthinkable and harshly punished. This culture of confidentiality created a palpable tension. The very air seemed thick with unspoken truths. For those working inside, the pressure was immense. Yet, amid this weighty responsibility, the operators maintained their calm, their fingers dancing over keys with practiced precision. Sometimes the messages passing through the secret room were coded in intricate ciphers, impenetrable to anyone without the key. Many famous historical telegrams traveled through such rooms before reaching their destinations. Outside, the regular telegraph office continued its steady rhythm, unaware of the hidden dramas unfolding just beyond the locked door. The secret room also held rumors of intercepted messages, espionage, and clandestine operations. Whispers among operators hinted at strange visitors arriving in the dead of night, handing over sealed envelopes, or making urgent phone calls. Such secrecy added to the mystique of the telegraph office, transforming it from a mere communication hub into a stage for the shadows of history. For operators assigned to this room, loyalty was paramount. Their work was never acknowledged publicly, but it was crucial. The secret room was a place where the invisible threads of power, war, and diplomacy were woven. As we leave this shadowed chamber behind, we carry with us the knowledge that communication is not just about connection, but sometimes about concealment. Next, we will turn to the final hours of the telegraph era, the rise of new technologies, and the fading echoes of Morse code. But for now, imagine the quiet tension of the secret room, its locked doors, the steady tapping of keys, and the secrets whispered only to the wires. The telegraph era may have ended decades ago, yet its echoes still resonate soft, persistent, like a faint tapping in the distance. Though the wires lie silent and the tapping rooms are long empty, the legacy of the telegraph lives on, woven into the fabric of modern communication and the memories of those who once kept its pulse alive. Today, if you visit museums dedicated to technology or communication history, you'll often find the relics of that golden age. Heavy brass keys, long wooden desks, clunky sounders, and coils of insulated wire each piece, a testament to the ingenuity and labor of generations of operators. These machines, silent and still, once carried the weight of the world's messages. Some museums even demonstrate the tapping of Morse code, allowing visitors to experience the rhythms that connected continents. Volunteers and enthusiasts keep the practice alive, sending messages in the old code, not for necessity, but out of respect and passion. Among the remaining telegraph operators, now advanced in years, some still tap for fun, their fingers recalling the dance of dots and dashes with surprising ease. For them, Morse code is more than a language. It is a link to the past, a cherished skill, and a lifelong friend. This dedication has helped preserve the knowledge and spirit of telegraphy for future generations. Beyond museums and hobbyists, the influence of the telegraph persists in unexpected places. Morse code, that simple yet profound system of communication, still finds use in niche fields, amateur radio enthusiasts, maritime communication, and even in emergency signaling. The code's clarity and simplicity make it timeless. Perhaps most remarkable is how Morse code has reached beyond our planet. In space missions, astronauts have used it as a backup communication method, a reminder that even in the vastness of space, the humble tapping code has value. The dots and dashes that once echoed across continents now silently traverse the void, a testament to human ingenuity. The telegraph's legacy also lives on in the way we think about communication itself. It was the first technology to bring the world closer, shrinking vast distances into moments. It paved the way for the telephone, radio, internet, and the digital age. Its story reminds us of the human desire to connect, to share news, joy, sorrow, and secrets. At its core, the telegraph was about people, the operators who listened and tapped, the messengers who delivered, the senders and receivers on distant ends. Their stories, struggles, and triumphs are the true heartbeat behind the wires. As we conclude our journey through the history of the telegraph, let us remember that technology is never just machines and codes. It is the people who breathe life into it. The tapping room, once filled with the sounds of Morse code, may be silent now, but its echoes continue in the museum halls, in the fingers of enthusiasts, in the quiet corners of history. And somewhere, across the vast reaches of space, the simple code of dots and dashes still whispers, carrying the spirit of connection beyond the bounds of Earth. Thank you for joining this journey into the world of the telegraph, the wires that once carried the world's messages, the hands that made it possible, and the echoes that will forever remain. Every great story must come to an end. For the telegraph, that end was slow, steady, and bittersweet, a gradual fading as new technologies emerged to replace the tapping keys and Morse code rhythms that had once connected the world. The rise of the telephone and the advent of radio communication heralded a new era, one where voice could travel instantly and without the need for complex decoding. The golden age of telegraphy marked by the clatter of brass keys, the hum of electric currents, and the steady pulse of dots and dashes began to wane in the early 20th century. Radio waves carried broadcasts across vast distances without wires, reaching audiences and military units alike. At first, these innovations complemented the telegraph, adding new dimensions to communication. But as technology advanced, the telegraph's place in daily life diminished. Telephone lines stretched across cities and towns, allowing people to speak directly rather than tap messages. The tapping room was not just a workplace, but a community, a shared world of rhythm and focus. Telegraph offices, once bustling centers of activity, began to grow quieter. For the operators, the men and women who had dedicated their lives to mastering Morse code, the change was profound. Many felt a deep connection to their work, a sense of pride in the skill and discipline the profession demanded. As the telegraph's importance faded, so too did the opportunities for these skilled operators. Some embraced the new technologies, retraining as telephone operators or radio technicians, applying their knowledge of communication to the next generation. Others found themselves out of work, their expertise no longer in demand. The loss was felt keenly, both professionally and personally. Operators who had spent decades perfecting their FIST, their unique keying style, now watched as the machines they knew best fell silent. The tapping keys, once central to communication, became relics. The culture of the telegraph office, its jargon, camaraderie, and rituals began to disappear. Yet, the legacy of the telegraph endured. Its impact on business, war, and daily life had been immense. It shrank the world, making distant places reachable in moments and forging connections that shaped the modern era. For some operators, retirement was bittersweet a farewell to a profession that had defined them. Reunions and associations formed among former telegraphists, preserving memories and stories of the tapping rooms. Museums began collecting equipment, preserving the history of telegraphy for future generations. The end of the telegraph also marked the rise of a new kind of communication world, one based on voice, then digital data, and eventually the internet. The dots and dashes of Morse code faded into history, but their influence remained embedded in the culture of communication. Today, when we send a text message or make a call, we carry forward the spirit of those early operators. The discipline, speed, and precision required in telegraphy set the stage for the technologies that followed. As we close this chapter, it is important to remember the human stories behind the machines. The telegraph was not just wires and keys. It was the hands, ears, and hearts of the operators who made it sing. And though their profession has passed, their legacy continues. In our final section, we will reflect on the lasting impact of the telegraph, the invisible threads connecting past and present. But for now, picture the last tapping room growing silent, the operators rising from their chairs one final time, and the world moving on. The telegraph era may have ended decades ago, yet its echoes still resonate soft, persistent, like a faint tapping in the distance. Though the wires lie silent, and the tapping rooms are long empty, the legacy of the telegraph lives on, woven into the fabric of modern communication and the memories of those who once kept its pulse alive. Heavy brass keys, worn wooden desks, clunky sounders, and coils of insulated wire each piece, a testament to the ingenuity and labor of generations of operators. Today, if you visit museums dedicated to technology or communication history, you'll often find the relics of that golden age. Volunteers and enthusiasts keep the practice alive, sending messages in the old code, not for necessity, but out of respect and passion. These machines, silent and still, once carried the weight of the world's messages. For them, Morse code is more than a language. It is a link to the past, a cherished skill, and a lifelong friend. Some museums even demonstrate the tapping of Morse code, allowing visitors to experience the rhythms that connected continents. Among the remaining telegraph operators, now advanced in years, some still tap for fun, their fingers recalling the dance of dots and dashes with surprising ease. This dedication has helped preserve the knowledge and spirit of telegraphy for future generations. Beyond museums and hobbyists, the influence of the telegraph persists in unexpected places. Morse code, that simple yet profound system of communication, still finds use in niche fields, amateur radio enthusiasts, maritime communication, and even in emergency signaling. The code's clarity and simplicity make it timeless. It paved the way for the telephone, radio, internet, and the digital age. Perhaps most remarkable is how Morse code has reached beyond our planet. In space missions, astronauts have used it as a backup communication method, a reminder that even in the vastness of space, the humble tapping code has value. The dots and dashes that once echoed across continents now silently traverse the void, a testament to human ingenuity. The telegraph's legacy also lives on in the way we think about communication itself. But its echoes continue in the museum halls, in the fingers of enthusiasts, in the quiet corners of history. It is the people who breathe life into it. It was the first technology to bring the world closer, shrinking vast distances into moments. Its story reminds us of the human desire to connect, to share news, joy, sorrow, and secrets. At its core, the telegraph was about people, the operators who listened and tapped, the messengers who delivered, the senders and receivers on distant ends. Their stories, struggles, and triumphs are the true heartbeat behind the wires. As we conclude our journey through the history of the telegraph, let us remember that technology is never just machines and codes. The tapping room, once filled with the sounds of Morse code, may be silent now. And somewhere, across the vast reaches of space, the simple code of dots and dashes still whispers, carrying the spirit of connection beyond the bounds of Earth. Thank you for joining this journey into the world of the telegraph. The wires that once carried the world as messages, the hands that made it possible, and the echoes that will forever remain.